Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivraj Jagacharya Shturtera Srimad His Divine Grace. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Kirtanesvara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Nitai Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devyam Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudirayet Nastapreshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Hare Krishna, everybody. So I'll be speaking this morning as well as this evening. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Creation of the Fourth Order, chapter number 22, text number 13. Oh, actually, is my phone over there? Yeah, I'm going to need that for the class. I have some references. Reading from, chapter, text 13. Okay. Thank you. Kachina kushalam nata Indriyartarta Vedinam. Oh, I prepared for the wrong verse. Vyasana Vapa Etasmin Patitanam Swakarmavi Kachina Kushalam Nata Indriyartarta Vedinam Vyasana Vapa Etasmin Patitanam Swakarmibi Kachina Kushalam Nata Indriyartarta Vedinam Vyasana Vapa Etasmin Patitanam Swakarmabi. One more time. Kachina Kushalam Nata Indriyartarta Vedinam Vyasana Vapa Etasmin Patitanam Swakarmabi.
Paschinna Kushalam Nata
Paschinna Kushalam Nata Indriyartarta Vedinam Vyasana Vapa Etasmin
Patitanam Swakarmavi
Patitanam Swakarmavi.
Kachinna Kusalam Nata
Kashtina Kushalam Nata
Indriyathartha Vedinam
Indriyartarta Vedinam
Asana Vapa Tasmin
Vyasana Vapa Etasmin
Patitanam Swakarmavi
Patitanam Swakarmavi. Kachina Kushalam Nata Indriyartarta Vedinam Vyasana Vapa Etasmin Patitanam Swakarmavi. Word for word. You want to try, Jamuna? Word for word. Kachit, weather. Na, our. Kushalam, good fortune. Nata, O masters. Indriya Arta, sense gratification as the ultimate goal of life. Artavedinam, persons who understand only sense gratification. That's me. Vyasana, illness. Avape, God. Etasmin, in this material existence. Patitanam, those who are fallen. Swakarma bihi, by their own ability. Srila Prabhupada's translation. Prithu Maharaj inquired from the sages about persons entangled in this dangerous material existence because of their previous actions. Could such persons, whose only aim is sense gratification, be blessed with any good fortune? Please repeat. Prithu Maharaj inquired from the sages about persons entangled in this dangerous material existence because of their previous actions. Could such persons, whose only aim is sense gratification, be blessed with any good fortune? Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Maharaj Prithu did not ask the Kumaras about their good fortune, for the Kumaras are always auspicious by dint of their life in celibacy. Since they are always engaged on the path of liberation, there was no question of ill fortune. In other words, Brahmanas and Vaishnavas who are strictly following the path of spiritual advancement are always fortunate. The question was asked by Prithu Maharaj for his own sake, since he was in the position of a grihasta and in charge of the royal authority. Kings are not only grihastas, who are generally absorbed in sense gratification, but are sometimes employed to kill animals in hunting because they have to practice the killing art. Otherwise, it is very difficult for them to fight their enemies. Such things are not auspicious. 4 kinds of sinful activities, associating with women for illicit sex, eating meat, intoxication, and gambling, are allowed for Kshatriyas. For political reasons, sometimes they have to take to these sinful activities. Kshatriyas do not refrain from gambling. One vivid example is the Pandavas. When the Pandavas were challenged by the opposite party, Duryodhana, to gamble and risk their kingdom, they could not refrain. And by that gambling, they lost their kingdom, and their wife was insulted. Similarly, the Kshatriyas cannot refrain from fighting if challenged by the opposite party. Therefore, Prithu Maharaj, taking consideration of all these facts, inquired whether there is any auspicious path. Grihastha life is inauspicious because Grihastha means consciousness for sense gratification. And as soon as there is sense gratification, one's position is always full of dangers. This material world is said to be param yadvi param natesham, dangerous at every step. Every time we hear that verse, we have to think of Ganga Mantri, who always quotes that verse. I always think of Ganga when I hear that verse. Everyone in this material world is struggling hard for sense gratification. Clearing all these points, Maharaj Prithu inquired from the 4 Kumaras about the fallen conditioned souls who are rotting in this material world due to their past bad or inauspicious activities. Is there any possibility for their auspicious spiritual life? In this verse, the word Indriyarthartha Vedinam is very significant. It indicates persons whose only aim is to satisfy the senses. They are also described as Patitanam, or fallen. Only one who stops all activities for sense gratification is considered to be elevated. Another significant word is Swakarma. One becomes fallen by dint of his own past bad activities. Everyone is responsible for his fallen condition. Let me repeat that. Everyone is responsible for his fallen condition because of his own activities. When activities are changed to devotional service, one's auspicious life begins. Yai. Om Jnana Tamarandhyasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurue Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadama Dadati Swapadantikam. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radha Vrindavaneshwari Vishubhanu Shuti Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarabhis Chakri Pasinghi Bhyevacha Patitinam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Prachadane Nirvashesha Shanyavani Pashtatardesha Tadane Namaste Jivanandaya Dasaya Vanachanine Prabhupada Vallabhaya Singhasilavanurine Agyana Dvanta Gramanam Pashtacha Patitatmanam Gyana Gurudaya Chitaharine Chakshashena Maha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Okay, so nice verse for a brahmachari, I suppose. Actually, we're all struggling with sense gratification, unless we're Paramahamsas. So, speaking of this Grihastha ashram, married life, and family life, and Maharaj Prithu's existence. Maharaj Prithu is a pure devotee of God. He is the purest type of soul, and he is apparently living a life of material entanglement, although he is like the lotus flower and is situated above all of that material suffering, all that material illusion. So he's a great example of how we should act. There are 12 Mahajans, or authorities in spiritual life, and out of those, quite a few are also Grihastha. Shiva, Bali Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, etc. So it is possible that we can become like the lotus. Krishna gives the famous verse, What's the verse? I'm forgetting it now. Anyways, he says that whatever you do, and whatever activities you do, just remember me in the form of Krishna. With your mind and consciousness, Maya Prita, Mano Budhir, with your mind and consciousness fixed on me, surely you will attain me without fail. So that's one of my favorite verses. I can't believe the Sanskrit slipped my mind right now. I have to look at it. Sorry. Need to know. Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mamanusmarabhija maya pritamana bhuvir mamesha shamshaya. Yeah. So with our mind, we fix our mind on God, on Krishna, and in that way we perform all our activities. And in that way we will attain Krishna. So this is bhakti yoga. Always think of Krishna and never forget Krishna. Always remember God, never forget God. So Krishna's mercy is the solution to our problems in material existence. We can find so many reasons to fulfill our desires. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says there's 3 gates leading to hell or to the degradation of the soul: lust, anger, and greed. And Krishna says we have to curb these enemies. So if we're afflicted with lust, anger, and greed, whether we're a grihastha or we're a brahmachari or we're a sannyasi or we're a sudra or a brahmana or kshatriya or a vaishya, in any case, we're going to have to suffer those effects. So we have to choose a path that is going to help us to overcome lust, anger, and greed to the best of our ability, whether that be the grihastha ashram, the brahmachari ashram, whether that mean we act in a brahminical way or we work as a sudra or as a hardworking person. Either way, we have to overcome this lust, anger, and greed. So in all cases, any material ashram, any material solution is not the actual solution. It's not a solution to our problems. And I think that I was with one of the heaviest of all, brahmachari sannyasi devotees is His Holiness Jayadvaita Maharaj. We were with him in India. And, he was reading the Krishna book. He does these nice things where instead of just giving like a formal class, he does a reading and everybody discusses. That's his kind of style nowadays. And he likes to answer questions because he's like a thunderbolt of transcendental knowledge. But one person had brought up what a point to bring up to Jayadvaita Maharaj. He said that Bhaktivinoda Thakur recommended the grihastha ashram, or the living as a household life with wife and family, as superior in the age of Kali to renunciation. And Jayadvaita Maharaj, he's totally renounced personality, the most renounced devotee I know. And he said, well, he may have said that, but Srila Prabhupada recommended brahmacharya and sannyas. And so, but then he kind of elaborated. He says, I'm a follower of Srila Prabhupada. So then he elaborated. He said, in any case, if we're changing ashram, or if we're getting married to satisfy our senses, or if we're doing anything to satisfy our senses, that's not the solution. Because the lust will still be there. The greed will still be there. The anger will still be there. We have to perform Krishna consciousness. And another heavy book, controversial book by another extraordinarily heavy sannyasi brahmachari devotee is Bhaktivinoda Swami's book, Brahmacharya and Krishna Consciousness, which is a really taboo book, although it's very wonderful. And if you read it, even if you're a grihastha, it's really powerful knowledge. But one of the things he says in that book is the solution to lust is not, to put on saffron robes. The solution to lust is to become Krishna conscious. In any case, let's become Krishna conscious. Have a relationship with God that's so fulfilling that you are free of all lust, anger, and greed. So the solution is not, fulfilling my desire. The solution is performing devotional service, seriously and sincerely, performing devotional service. And we may have to go through the gradual process of purification in order to do that. We may have to get married, have children, but ultimately the idea is that Krishna is in the center, and so it's purified. And we see that, there are great grihastha devotees that were, pure devotees, and therefore they were able to overcome. So real sannyas doesn't just mean, taking the formal order of sannyas. Real sannyas means doing everything for Krishna. Krishna confirms that in the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. What's the verse? Right at the beginning of the 6th chapter. He says, one who is unattached to the fruits of his work. Yeah. Anashrita kamar phalam karyam karma karoti ya sa sannyasi cha yogi cha na niragir na chakriyaha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, one who is unattached to the fruits of his work and who works as he is obligated is in the renounced order of life. And he is the true mystic, not he who lights no fire and performs no duty. So Krishna himself is stating that a real renunciation means to work as we're obligated, to do what we have to do. And what are we really obligated to do? What is the true Dharma? What is our true purpose in life? Our true purpose in life is to develop a relationship with God. That's the human Dharma. Savai pumsam paradharmo yato bhaktirtha. The real Dharma for all humanity is to love and have a relationship with Krishna. To develop this relationship by practicing Krishna consciousness. And therefore, in order to do that, we may have to do so many different things. We may have to do so many different ashrams, so many different activities. We may have to work. We may have to do so many things. So in that case, we have to fulfill our true Dharma of just trying to have a relationship with God. Because we can't ever go beyond our guna and karma, right? Krishna says, what will repression accomplish? So therefore, we have to just act according to guna and karma and dovetail that in Krishna's service. Do whatever we do and do it for Krishna. Yat karosi, yat ashnasi, yat juhosi dadasi yat tapasyasi konteya, tat karosu amararpanam. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer, give away, and whatever charity you perform, whatever austerities you perform, do that, O son of Kunti, is an offering to me. So do whatever you do and do it for Krishna. And in that way, develop love for Krishna. So Krishna's mercy is the real solution to overcoming all these problems. Not just I gotta get married. I gotta get all right. On the other side of things, I gotta get out of marriage. It's the other. Some people are thinking like that. But there's a nice, beautiful story that I'm into telling stories these last few classes. So I'm just gonna tell another story of Maharaj Chitraketu. Maharaj Chitraketu was a great and powerful devotee of Krishna, great and powerful devotee of God. And this is way back in the, Satya or Treta Yuga, so it's not exactly like things are today. People have extraordinarily long lifespans. One of the things about a real Kshatriya means a warrior, a person in the warrior class. So we don't have that today. Actually, everybody in the age of Kali is born with the Sudra consciousness. So in previous ages, people were born with this Kshatriya blood, which is nothing like we see today. Their bodies were extraordinarily tough. They were born in the pure mode of passion. They were able to act in the mode of passion like you can imagine. So King Chitraketu had 10 million wives. So that is the mode of passion. In case you're wondering, he had 10 million wives. But he was able to, because he was such a powerful Kshatriya. He had 10 million wives. And he had everything he ever wanted. His kingdom was so prosperous. He had a beautiful palace, beautiful people. Everything was prosperous in his kingdom. He couldn't have asked for any more. The opulence, the royalty, the material pleasure that was offered him. 10 million beautiful wives. He was so full of opulence. But he had one single problem. He couldn't have a son. All of his wives were somehow or another, by Krishna's divine arrangement, not fertile. He was in great agony because he didn't have a son. He had this giant kingdom. He's a king. The duty of a Kshatriya is to have a son, to rule the kingdom and to pass the kingdom on. But he had no son. So he was in agony. He was very distressed about this, not having a son. So by Providence arrangement, a great sage, Angira Muni, came by and visited Maharaj Chitraketu. Because Angira Muni was an enlightened soul, enlightened Brahman and Krishna. He had no business except to sing the glories of the Lord and act in an enlightened way. He was a free, liberated soul. So he would just travel here and there, singing Krishna's glories. And he appeared in the palace of Maharaj Chitraketu. And he began to inquire from Maharaj Chitraketu, oh, you're so nice, kingdom, so wonderful, but you seem as though you are depressed. Of course, it's described that Angira Muni could totally read Chitraketu's mind and understood what was going on, but out of kindness, he inquired, why are you distressed? And so King Chitraketu said, oh, my dear sage, my dear Angira, Maharaj, please bless me, I have no son, and therefore I'm in deep depression because such a king needs a son. This is in the sixth canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, by the way. I have no son, and therefore I'm miserable. So the Angira Muni had some compassion on Maharaj Chitraketu, who was obviously very absorbed in material life of family and children, and that was where his mind was. He wasn't thinking of God so much. So Angira Muni said, yes, I will give you a son. I'll bless you that you'll be able to have a son. We'll perform a yagya. They performed a fire yagya, and from that yagya, there's some fruits, right? And he gave that fruit to his wife from the yagya. And so the wife ate the fruit. They conceived, and she became pregnant. So a child was born. Actually, it was sweet rice. It wasn't fruit. It was sweet rice. It was a yagya, and she gave her some sweet rice from the yagya. And Angira Muni said, this child will bring you great jubilation and great lamentation, which is the nature of everything in the material world. Will bring you great jubilation and great lamentation. But Maharaj Chitraketu was unconcerned because he was just so happy to have a son. And the son was born. It was a beautiful child, wonderful, extraordinarily beautiful child. And he began to have increased affection for this child. Remember, he has 10 million wives. So he had this increased affection for this child. And he started giving all his time to this child and the mother and the father and the son. The mother was the first and the primary wife of King Chitraketu. She was considered the most beautiful also. So he was giving all his attention to this family, and he would play catch with the son and train the son in the ways of the Kshatriya life. And his whole life became absorbed in this child and this wife. And in due course of time, he began to have no affection for the other wives, the other 900,999 wives. And so they began to become envious of the son and the wife. And they were thinking, we're like maidservants, there's no affection for us. We're servants of the maidservants. We're lower than the maidservants. And so they began to become very envious. And so they planned to kill the son. And in due course of time, they gave the child poison. And we'll just read a little from that text because it's pretty intense. It's intense. Just for the record, it's going to be an intense reading. So get ready. Yeah. Thinking that her child had been sleeping, unaware of the poison administered by her queens, Queen Kirtanesvara walked within the house, thinking that her son was sleeping deeply. She did not understand that he was dead. Thinking that her child had been sleeping for a long time, Queen Kirtanesvara, who was certainly very intelligent, ordered the nurse, my dear friend, please bring my son here. When the maidservant approached the child who was laying down, she saw that his eyes were turned upward. There was no signs of life, all his senses having stopped, and she could understand that she was dead, that the child was dead. Seeing this, she immediately cried, now I am doomed, and fell to the ground. In great agitation, the maidservant struck her breast with both hands and cried loudly in regretful words. Hearing her loud voice, the queen immediately came, and when she approached her son, she saw that he was suddenly dead. In great lamentation, her hair and dress in disarray, the queen fell to the ground unconscious. O King Parikshit, hearing the loud crying, all the inhabitants of the palace came, both men and women, being equally grieved. They also began to cry. The queens who had administered the poison also cried pretentiously, knowing full well of their offense. When King Chitraketu heard of his son's death from unknown causes, he became almost blind. Because of his great affection for his son, his lamentation grew like a blazing fire. And as he went to see the dead child, he kept slipping and falling on the ground. Surrounded by ministers and other officers, and the learned brahmanas present, the king approached and fell unconscious at the child's feet, his hair and dress scattered. When the king, breathing heavily, regained his consciousness, his eyes were tearful, and he could not speak. When the queen saw her husband, King Chitraketu emerged in great lamentation and saw the dead child, who was the only son in the family. She lamented in various ways. This increased the pain in the cores of their hearts, in the hearts of all the inhabitants of the palace, the ministers and the Brahmins. Continue, we'll skip a little bit here. And then this is, the mother speaking. My dear son, you have slept a long time. Now please get up. Your playmates are calling to you to play. Since you must be very hungry, please get up and suck my breast and dissipate our lamentation. My dear son, I am certainly most unfortunate, for I can no longer see your mild smiling. You have closed your eyes forever. I therefore conclude that you have been taken from this planet to another, from which you will not return. My dear son, I can no longer hear your pleasing voice. So obviously it's a very sad scene that is taking place. So they were very, very much in deep lamentation. And what happened was Maharaj Angira returned with Narada Muni, the great sage Narada Muni. So they returned. And in due course of time, Narada Muni began to ask what's going on. So Narada Muni then enlightened Maharaj Chitraketu about transcendental knowledge. And continuing on the next chapter, actually, Sri Sukadeva Goswami said, while King Chitraketu, overcome by lamentation, lay like a dead body at the side of the dead body of his son, the two great sages, Narada and Angira, instruct him about spiritual consciousness as follows. O king, what relationship does the dead body for which you lament have with you? And what relationship do you have with him? You may say that you are now related as father and son, but do you think this relationship existed before? Does it truly exist now? Will it continue in the future? So he begins to enlighten him in the basic knowledge of Krishna consciousness, that we're not this body, that the body is only temporary, the bodily relationships are temporary, and therefore material love is an illusion, but love on the spiritual platform is quite real. And actually, Maharaj Angira and Narada Muni brought the child back to life, and they were so happy. And then they said, oh, don't you recognize us? It's your father. And the child said, which father are you? I've had so many fathers. I've had so many mothers. Which one are you? And in that way, the king realized, oh, I was an illusion. And he actually became a very, very great devotee of the Lord. So Krishna says the very first teaching of the Bhagavad Gita, that we're all depressed about this material existence. Ultimately, we're afraid of death, birth, old age, and disease. Birth, death, old age, and disease. Those are the real problems of life. We have so many problems, but the real problems are birth, death, old age, and disease. Why do we have to get old? Why do we have to get sick? And why do we have to die? And so spiritual light is a solution to that problem. And so what was it Krishna said? He says, Natvevaham jatu naswam natvam nimi janadipaha nachaiva na bhavishama sarve viyamataparam. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. Dehinosmin yata dehe komaram yogaram jara tata dehantara praptir diras tatra namuyati. As the embodied soul continually passes from boyhood to youth to old age, similarly, the soul passes into another body at the time of death. A sober person is not bewildered by such change. So Krishna is explaining that a sober person is not bewildered by this change of body. Although we may have some emotion, we may feel sad upon losing a loved one, intense lamentation is not necessary because we understand that they're eternal, I am eternal, and that we've had a bodily relationship and now it's ceased to be. And that's why we have to strive to love each other on the spiritual platform as parts and parcels of Krishna. So if husband and wife or a family life is based on that concept, that we're helping each other in Krishna consciousness, and that is very nice. But to the degree that it's affected by materialism, it will be inauspicious. Because anytime we're acting for our own sense gratification, acting for selfishness, we're going to have inauspiciousness. And the Dalai Lama, who's a Buddhist, of course, but he says one thing that I find very wise and true. They ask him, why do people have negative emotions? And he said, negative emotions are a result of selfishness at all times, in all circumstances, at all places. That's absolutely true. What does it mean to be selfless? Selflessness ultimately means living on the spiritual platform, seeing everybody as part of God, and serving God with our heart, mind, and soul. So this is the compassion of a very pure devotee like Narada and Angira, that they enlighten Maharaj Chitraketu in this knowledge of the soul. I know that when my father died, it was naturally a pretty heavy-duty situation, because it kind of like snuck up on us. He was sick, and then all of a sudden really sick, and then all of a sudden it was like probably going to last like a month, and I was pretty like distressed. And so I went to see him, and it was like pretty heavy duty, and he was supposed to like last a few more days. But then I went home, and when I got home, I got in an argument with a person I was with, and I was like sitting in my garage alone, and then my mom called me and said, "Oh, your father's passed away." And I was just like totally devastated at 18 years old. I had no transcendental knowledge, none of the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita or anything like that. I mean, I read the Bhagavad Gita, but it was not in my mind at all. And so I was just alone there, really distressed. And then person came back, she came back, and so she was kind of comforting me, and I went over to my brother's house, and naturally he was upset also. So all people there, friends were there comforting us, and I went into we had a meditation room. My brother had all these books, and then I went in there, and he was reading the Bhagavad Gita, and he looked up at me, and he just read that verse: "Never was there a time when I did not exist. Never will there be a time when I cease to be." And I remember I felt like it was just so like real, and everybody was comforting us. But the most compassionate thing that I felt anybody did for me during that time was I got a text from Dasa Prabhu, and he just said, there's no need to lament because the soul is eternal, and because you're a devotee, your father's destination is auspicious. And I felt like that was the most compassionate text I received during that whole crisis, was that someone giving me a reassurance of that transcendental knowledge. And after that, my life totally went downhill. I was pretty destroyed. And so that's what eventually led me to be very serious about Krishna consciousness. But there's so many nice stories indicating that ultimately it's Krishna. And so if a devotee is whether they're a Kshatriya or a Grihastha or a sannyasi or a renounced person, or they have to be situated at Krishna's lotus feet. And there's a nice story in the Chaitanya Bhagavat about Srivas Pandit. Srivas Pandit was a great devotee of Lord Chaitanya. And so Srivas Pandit was always doing kirtan. And it was in his house that the Sankirtan movement started. Actually, we'll just back up 1 second. I'll go back to that story just to finish the story of Chitraketu Maharaj. So Chitraketu became a great devotee of the Lord. And he used to fly around in a celestial airplane just chanting and doing kirtan. And once while he was flying, he looked down and he saw that Lord Shiva was giving a Bhagavatam class. But sitting on his lap was his wife Parvati. And so Maharaj Chitraketu kind of snickered a little bit, like, look, there's this Lord Shiva. He's speaking on the Bhagavatam, but he's got his wife sitting on his lap. Lord Chitraketu kind of thought, I may be a little bit of a better devotee than Lord Shiva. And that was a big mistake, because Parvati became furious. And so she cursed Chitraketu that he would become a demon. And so fast forward, Lord Indra had offended his guru pretty severely. He had had sex with his guru's wife. In case you didn't know, that's an offense to the guru. So Brihaspati was like, okay, we're finished. And so then the demigods were in trouble because now they didn't have a guru, they didn't have any blessings of the Vaishnavas, so therefore they were really in a serious situation because the demons were invading. And he had to find a guru, so he took shelter of a Brahmin named Vishvarup. Vishvarup, I think. Yeah, Vishvarup. But Vishvarup was, okay, I'll be your guru and I'll bless you and so forth. But he also had affection for the demons. Vishvarup also had affection for the Daityas. The Daityas means the demons, and the Daityas means the demigods. So he had affection for the Daityas because he had some relation to them. So he offered the yajna on behalf of the demigods, but secretly he offered some oblations for the Daityas, for the demons. And when Indra found out, Indra was furious and realized, you're not on my team. So Indra cut his head off. Indra is he gets himself in a lot of trouble, obviously. But he's in the reason is because he's in a position of extraordinary leadership. And, we couldn't handle the position of King Indra, the king of the celestial realm. And he's dealing with, celestial things. And he has, it's a very difficult position to be in. It's a very hard position. So Krishna still always forgives him and loves him because he's doing a very difficult service. So that's a lesson to be learned too, that if we're having a service extremely difficult, then, we're there for a reason because we're qualified. Krishna's grace. So, So then the curse was going to come upon him because he killed a Brahmin. So that for some serious karma coming upon him. And he was thinking, oh man, I'm going to get a lot of reactions for this. So he distributed the reactions to 4 things. He distributed them to the desert, to women, to trees, and to water. Or to the earth. And that's why the earth has deserts. And there's various other things. You guys don't want to go into that too much. But so Maharaj Chitraketu, who was killed by, who was cursed by Parvati, the wife of Lord Shiva, he took birth as a demon named Vritrasura. And Indra was to fight Vritrasura because there was anger. The son of Vishvarup was angry that his father was killed. So he did a yajna to create a demon that was going to kill Indra. But he mispronounced the mantras, and therefore the demon was to be killed by Indra. So this demon appeared, this demon named Vritrasura was the massive, fiery, horrendous monster, came out of the fire yajna and, was going to kill Indra. But actually, internally was Chitraketu and was a great devotee. And so this is pretty epic battle that takes place. And, there's a nice picture in the 6th canto of, of King Indra. He's like riding Ayurvata the elephant and he's going to fight, Vritrasura, and then he's getting kicked and he shows the elephant flying and King Indra on the back of the elephant, and he fights this demon. Ultimately, he wins because he has the thunderbolt weapon, which was gifted to him. But the demon, although he was acting like a demon, internally Vritrasura was a great devotee. And he was always meditating on Krishna, although he was forced to act like a demon, but internally he was a devotee. So at the time of death, all of his previous life came to him of being Chitraketu Maharaj, and he said these beautiful prayers to Krishna and left his body and went back to Godhead. So he had that little bit of karma to play out for offending Parvati and Shiva. So I just wanted to finish that story. It didn't have to do with exactly the topic of the class, but it's a great pastime. So there's one other pastime I was going to tell about Srivas Pandit, who was a great devotee, obviously one of the Panchatattva, one of the, he's Narada Muni, and appearing in Lord Chaitanya's pastimes. But Srivas Pandit was married. Lord Chaitanya became a renunciate. Lord Nityananda was a renunciate for some time, but also got married. Gadadhar Pandit was a sannyasi. Advaitacharya was married. So you see that these devotees, they're pure devotees, yet they were also in the married ashram. So how is it? So Lord Chaitanya very much loved Srivas Thakur and would perform kirtan in his house. And you can go there in Mayapur. You'll go there. The Srivas Angam. To me, that's the most powerful place to visit in Mayapur, all the different places. You can really feel this energy in Srivas Angam that Lord Chaitanya was here chanting. And it's just like a very effulgent place. And so Srivas was a pure devotee, always dedicated to just chanting the holy names and serving Lord Chaitanya, serving Krishna with his whole heart and soul. So once, here's the story. Once Lord Chaitanya asked Srivas, so Lord Chaitanya was visiting Srivas, he said, I do not see you going anywhere to earn a livelihood. You have a big family, so how can you maintain them? Lord Chaitanya was bewildered. He says, you're not going anywhere, you're just sitting in your house chanting Hare Krishna, yet your family is maintained. And Srivas replied, in my heart, I do not have any desire to go anywhere. Whatever is destined will come to me anyway. And then Srivas clapped 3 times, 1, 2, 3. Lord Chaitanya said, what does that mean? If 3 times food does not come to me, I will fast, and then I will tie a water pot to my neck and drown myself in the Ganges. So Srivas is obviously an extreme example, and obviously we can't imitate Srivas Thakur because she's, part of the Panchatattva. He's expansion of God. But the idea is that he clapped 3 times, and he said, by the time I clap, the Lord will have provided for me. And Lord Chaitanya was so pleased by his great faith, because Srivas had that much faith in the Lord's providing for him. He said, Lord Chaitanya said, hearing this extreme vow, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was astonished. The Lord said, why should you fast, Srivas? Even if Goddess Lakshmi becomes poverty-stricken, still poverty will never enter your house. This little explanation. Srivas Pandit's vow was not based on some sort of sentiment. He, along with his family members, used to remain absorbed in chanting the holy names of the Lord the entire day and night. Being a pure devotee of the Lord, he was well aware that the Supreme Lord is the maintainer of all living beings of the universe. And moreover, Srivas Pandit's house, although it was in the material world, but it was in fact part of the spiritual world, because Lord Chaitanya, the Supreme Lord, personally used to come to his house and chant the holy names of the Lord continuously. So that's an example of, we should have ultimate faith in Krishna as the provider. Upadrasta nimantascha bharta bhokta maheshwara paramatmeti chapyukto dehismin purusha paraha. He's the overseer and the permitter, and he's the super soul in our heart. And he's actually providing everything we need. So work is necessary. We have to work, whatever position we are. We can't ever avoid work. But the work is not what's actually maintaining us. It's Krishna. So all things come in their due course of time. Mayaprita madhubud here. We should have our mind fixed on Krishna. I was actually the wrong verse. I meant to say Maya dakshena prakriti suyute satsaracharam. That Krishna is the controller of everything in this material energy. Therefore, we're not in control of anything. Krishna is in control of everything. We just let him provide. So the example given is that we may work so hard for enjoyment. We're working so hard for enjoyment. I'm sure some of us who've been in the material world, who were at once non-devotees, had this experience of everybody wants love, everybody wants to fall in love. And so they go out and they meet someone and it's like, oh, this is great. Just by random, it happens like that. But in the same way, we may think, I want to go look for some person. I want to look for pleasure. I want to look for this and that. We're thinking, I want to look for it. And we go out and we look very hard. But we may go out and we may get run over by a bus. Or it happens all the time. We hurt ourselves. We don't want it, but it comes to us by its own accord. So in the same way that suffering comes to us on its own accord, so will all the pleasures that we deserve come to us by our karma. So in any case, it's better to surrender to Krishna. Better just to serve Krishna. And like me and Lavanga were talking last night on the ride back from Mantra Oasis, Kardama Muni was a perfect example of a person who was pure devotee of Krishna. He was such a pure devotee, always meditating on the Lord, but he still had this desire for a wife. But he didn't act on it. He just accepted the Lord's going to provide, and the Lord did provide. And then he had a grasp to life, and at the end he went back home, back to Godhead. So we should always just focus on our God consciousness, and that will solve everything. So in the case that we're saying here, Prabhupada's saying, in a heavy way, he's saying, the grihastha life is inauspicious because grihastha means consciousness for sense gratification. So we have to be free of sense gratification in any case, whether we're a grihastha or a sannyasi. We have to not be attached to gratifying ourselves. We have to be attached to gratifying Krishna. Like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he had 14 children, but he was completely dedicated to satisfying Krishna in all respects, and therefore his house was like Vaikuntha. His house was the spiritual world. So everything can be used in Krishna's service, except blatantly sinful activities. So we just have to engage in Krishna's service wholeheartedly, and we'll be successful. I think that is all I have to say for today. Any questions or comments? Chandrika.
I was thinking about wrestling and faith. But yesterday was a situation I think George was in a wheelchair and he has a walker and all those things. I picked him up because we were going to a nursing home to visit Charahasa, but we were stopping by Krishna's home to do some administration. So I put everything in the car, and when we got to my house, I noticed the walker wasn't there. So that means it was left outside the car in the parking lot. So we drove back to there, and it was gone. And so he can't really function without the walker because, like especially in small places like the restroom and things like that. So we thought, what are we going to do? So I'm running around the parking lot looking to see where it could be. It wasn't there. So we got back in the car and we're thinking, okay, what to do? I was like, we're not going to be able to run around to different stores and look for one because different reasons. So I said, okay, I'll get you in the house. Remain transcendental. Krishna will provide. Somehow this will come. Just don't get in distress, because normally in that situation people get distressed. So I said, let me just go walk around the corner to Goodwill. You never know. So I went there, and it was a brand new walker in the box for a fraction of the price. Perfect walker. So he had the walker. So we were just talking about how easy it is to get in distress about things like that, but also showing that Krishna provides when you keep that vision, you remain, transcendental instead of getting in a angry,
And you're very exceptional at that. I always admire that quality in you. You are very transcendental. I'm inspired by your Krishna consciousness, so thank you for sharing.
Nice that Krishna just shows us miracles all the time.
I may talk a good game, but actually I'm totally bewildered all the time. So anyhow, but there's a I think of that class, that really fantastic class that Charu Prabhu gave, you're in the middle of a miracle. That'll stick with me.
Definitely, me too.
You're in the middle of a miracle, but it's true. So we just, all these material desires are going to come. And, there's a verse in Bhagavad Gita about, I forgot one of the words is kamakami. It's about, how the verse, Suresh? That's the verse. 71. That's the verse about the the desires flowing like waves. Yeah. And so the idea is that I'll just read the purport of that verse. It's really enlightening. We have 1 minute, so I'll just read the purport. And we have more than that, but we're going to end after this. 271. I think so. Yep. Apuryamanam 70. So Prabhupada is saying the verse is, a person who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled but is always still, can alone achieve peace, and not a man who strives to satisfy such desires. Although the vast ocean is always filled with water, it is always, especially during the rainy season, being filled with much more water. But the ocean remains steady. It is not agitated, nor does it cross beyond the limit of its brink. That is also true of a person fixed in Krishna consciousness. As long as one has the material body, the demands of the body for sense gratification will continue. The devotee, however, is not disturbed by such. That's a very enlightening thing to understand. As long as one has a material body, the demands of the body for sense gratification will continue. So we're never going to be free of the desire for sense gratification. It's always going to be there as long as we're in a body. And I always tell that pastime of how the devotee was going to take sannyas, but Shyamasundar Prabhu convinced him that he should, get married. And then Prabhupada said, I said, who are you to tell my brahmacharis to get married? Prabhupada was furious. And then he said he was still thinking about sense gratification. Prabhupada said, everybody's thinking of sense gratification in the material world. The devotee, however, is not disturbed by such desires because of his fullness. The Krishna conscious man is not in need of anything because the Lord fulfills all his material necessities. The Lord will fulfill by our karma and by our desire and by whatever may be there that we need. If we're surrendered to Krishna, then the Lord will fulfill in such a way that we can do it and go back home, back to Godhead. Therefore, he is like the ocean, always full in himself. Desires may come to him like the waters of the river that flow into the ocean, but he is steady in his activities, and he is not even slightly disturbed by his desires for sense gratification. The most prominent example of that is Ramananda Roy, who was, he was like bathing and training the Devi Dasis in their dancing. There's the offering, so I guess we can talk a little bit longer. Huh? He was training the Devi Dasis in their dancing, and in the course, he was even bathing them, but he was totally undisturbed, like touching wood, because internally he was fixed in his meditation of being Vishakasaki, being a gopi. He always thought of himself. It says in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, he always thought himself as a gopi internally. Although we can't imitate Ramananda Roy. Even Lord Chaitanya says no one can imitate Ramananda Roy. So don't think we can imitate him. That is the proof of Krishna conscious man, one who has lost all inclination for material sense gratification, although the desires are present. So that's the idea, that we don't want to be kamakami. We don't want to start trying to fulfill our desires, because once we start doing that, then we're entering into material energy. So we just try to satisfy Krishna and everything will be fulfilled. Because he remains satisfied in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, he can remain steady like the ocean and therefore enjoy full peace. Others, however, who want to fulfill their desires, even up to the limit of liberation, what to speak of material success, never attain peace. The fruitive workers, the salvationists, and also the yogis who are after mystic power are all unhappy because of unfulfilled desires. But the person in Krishna consciousness is happy in the service of the Lord, and he has no desires to be fulfilled. In fact, he does not even desire liberation from the so-called material bondage. The devotees of Krishna have no material desires, and therefore they are in perfect peace. So that's a really enlightening and powerful purport. And I take a lot of inspiration from that purport. Yeah. Thank you, Chandra. Any other shares? Since the offering's on there, we can. Wow. Ajitesh Prabhu, you have a question? Oh, no, you're 5 minutes. I thought you were raising your hand. I was like, really? Question from Ajitesh Prabhu. Suresh Prabhu.
I can tell the story again about Ramananda and Prabhupada in Nairobi about desires.
Take it.
All right. 1972, Brahmananda Swami at the time. He's driving Prabhupada in a car. They're stopped at a stoplight in Nairobi. And a pretty African girl walks across the street. And Brahmananda's eyes just follows her. And then his eyes follow her right to Prabhupada. Prabhupada's right next to him. And then Brahmananda says, Srila Prabhupada, it seems hopeless. As soon as I see a pretty girl, my eyes just go right to her. Yeah. And so Prabhupada, he didn't deny that. He said, that is natural. That the senses are naturally attracted to the sense objects. But then he says, but a Vaishnava stops at thinking. There's thinking, feeling, and willing. So the thought comes, and then he just dismisses it because he has a higher taste, a higher goal, a higher value, a higher consciousness. Yeah, but that's the trick to get that higher taste. So you can dismiss it. Otherwise, you just whoop, thinking, feeling, willing.
Yeah. Don't make plans to fulfill our desires. That's
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the point. The question could be raised that, like Sometimes it seems like, what is it? You feel like you can't control yourself. You can't control your feeling. And the willing is coming. So in that case, what does Krishna say? It is lust only, which is born of contact with the material mode of passion, in which burns like fire and is never satiated. So that's an interesting point there, that this lust is born of contact with the mode of material passion. So we have to avoid the mode of passion in all of our activities. Try to be in the mode of goodness. Try to understand things in goodness, not in passion. Because what's that verse Krishna says? Purusham, what is it? Purusha prakriti stohi, bhakte prakriti jangunan, karnam gunasango syad sadyoni janmashu. That, Purusha prakriti stohi, the living entity situated in this material world, Purusha prakriti stohi, bhakte prakriti jangunan, they're enjoying, bhakte prakriti, they're enjoying the material nature, born of jangunan, born of the modes of material nature. Karnam gunasango syad. Why? Because karnam gunasango, they're associating with those modes. So if we associate with people in the mode of passion, we're going to get passionate. If we associate with those circumstances, it's going to affect our mind. Therefore, we have to educate ourselves and associate with only those things that are elevating us in Krishna consciousness. So if we associate with ignorance, we're going to become very angry, very agitated. So that's why it's just so important to learn the science, perform it properly. Anyhow, thank you all so much for coming to Bhagavatam class. Hare Krishna. Take prasadam. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Never go wrong with that story of Chitraketu Maharaj.